The telegram arrived on the morning Delilah Grant buried her father, and by sunset, everything she thought she owned had vanished like smoke in a high wind. She stood in the dusty street of Malad City, Idaho, clutching the crumpled paper that proved her inheritance had been transferred to a man named Silas Cord, a name she had never heard before that cold October day in 1878. The bank manager, a nervous man with sweating palms, had shown her the documents with her father's signature, perfect in every curve and line, authorizing the sale of the ranch, the cattle, the mineral rights to the silver claim that had finally started paying out after 20 years of her father's backbreaking work. "I am sorry, Miss Grant," the manager had said, refusing to meet her eyes. "Everything appears to be in order. Your father sold everything 3 weeks ago. The money was wired to an account in San Francisco. But her father had been dying 3 weeks ago, barely able to lift his head from the pillow, certainly incapable of riding into town to sign papers. Delilah had been with him every moment, watching him fade, listening to him tell her about the land, about how she would be taken care of, how the silver claim would finally give her the life her mother had dreamed of before the feat took her 10 years back. Now she had nothing. The house she had grown up in belonged to Silas Cord. The cattle her father had raised from calves, the horses, the land itself, all gone. She had $67 in her reticule and the clothes on her back, the black mourning dress that suddenly felt like a costume for a play she had not auditioned for. The October wind cut through Malad City's main street, carrying the smell of coming snow from the mountains that rose like jagged teeth to the east. Delilah stood outside the bank, watching miners and ranch hands go about their business, and felt utterly alone. At 22 years old, she had nursed her father through his final illness, had run the ranch herself for the past 6 months as he grew weaker, and had believed she was prepared for what came after his death. She had not been prepared for theft. "You look like you have seen a ghost." The voice came from behind her, deep and rough as gravel underfoot. Delilah turned and found herself looking up at a man who seemed carved from the mountains themselves. He stood well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block the afternoon sun, wearing buckskins that had seen hard use and a coat made from bearskin. His hair hung past his shoulders, dark brown shot through with sun-bleached strands, and his face was all hard angles and weathered tan skin. But it was his eyes that caught her, pale blue like winter ice, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I have seen worse than a ghost," she heard herself say. "I have seen a thief's handiwork." The man shifted, and she noticed the rifle slung across his back, the knife at his belt, the way he stood like he was ready for anything. Stealing is common enough in these parts. What did they take? Everything. The word came out bitter. My inheritance, my home, my father's life work. She did not know why she was telling this to a stranger, except that he had asked, and she needed to say it out loud to make it real. "A man named Silas Cord forged my father's signature and took it all." Something changed in the stranger's face, a hardening around the eyes. "Silas Cord. You know him?" "I know of him. He has been working this territory for 2 years now, finding people who are dying or desperate, forging deeds and bills of sale. He hit a ranch up north last spring, took everything from a widow and her children. By the time the law figured out what happened, he was gone." The man's jaw tightened. Law has been looking for him, but he is like smoke. Delilah felt something crack open inside her chest, rage pouring through like floodwater. "Then the law is not looking hard enough." "No," the man agreed. "They are not. But I am." She studied him more carefully, taking in the well-worn rifle, the cautious way he watched the street, the coiled readiness in his stance. "You are a bounty hunter?" "Not exactly. I am Brennan Zeller. I track people in the mountains, sometimes for pay, sometimes because they need tracking." He looked at her steadily. "Cord took something from a friend of mine last year, a mining claim up in the sawtooth that had been in his family for a generation. My friend hanged himself when he lost everything." The words hung between them, heavy with shared grief and fury. Delilah looked into Brennan Zeller's ice-blue eyes and saw something she recognized, something that matched the anger burning in her own chest. "I will pay you," she said quickly. "I have $67, and when you find him, when you get my inheritance back, I will pay you more, whatever is fair." Brennan shook his head slowly. "I am not doing this for money. I am doing it because Cord needs to be stopped before he destroys more lives. But if you want to come along, if you want to be there when I catch him, I will take you. You would take me into the mountains to track a criminal? You look like you can ride. Can you shoot? Yes. Her father had taught her both, insisting that a woman alone on a ranch needed to know how to protect herself. Then get whatever you need. We leave at first light. Cord was in Pocatello 4 days ago, flashing money around. If we move fast, we can pick up his trail before the snow hits. Brennan adjusted the rifle on his back. I should warn you, though, it will not be easy. We will be riding hard through rough country, sleeping cold, and when we catch up to him, it might get dangerous. If you would rather wait here while I handle it, I will bring back what is yours. Delilah thought of her father's face in his final hours, the way he had smiled, and told her not to worry, that she would be taken care of. She thought of the ranch house where she had been born, now in the hands of a liar and a thief. She thought of spending the rest of her life wondering if justice had been done. I am coming with you, she said firmly. This is my fight as much as yours. Brennan studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. Meet me at the livery stable at dawn. Bring a bedroll, warm clothes, and whatever food you can carry. We will not have time to hunt until we catch up to him. He turned to walk away, moving with a fluid grace that seemed at odds with his size, and Delilah called after him. Why are you doing this? Really? He looked back over his shoulder, and something in his expression softened just slightly. Because I have seen too many people like you lose everything to men like him, and because up in those mountains, I am the only law that matters. Then he was gone, disappearing into the flow of people on the street, and Delilah was left standing in the wind, clutching a telegram that had destroyed her life, and holding onto a thin thread of hope that a man named Brennan Zeller could somehow make it right. She spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. The boarding house where she had taken a room after the bank had locked her out of her own home, let her purchase supplies on credit. She packed hardtack, dried beef, coffee, and cornmeal into saddlebags, rolled her warmest blankets into a tight bundle, and changed from her morning dress into riding clothes, a split skirt and heavy wool shirt that had belonged to her father. Everything she owned fit into 2 bags now. A week ago, she had owned 2,000 acres and a silver claim worth $50,000. Now she was reduced to what she could carry on a horse. She did not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's signature on those forged documents, perfect and damning. She wondered where Silas Cord was, what he looked like, whether he had any idea that someone was coming for him. She wondered if Brennan Zeller was as good as he seemed to think he was, if they truly had a chance of catching a man who had evaded the law for 2 years. Mostly, though, she thought about the way Brennan had looked at her, with those pale blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to her bones. There had been something in his gaze, a recognition, like he understood exactly what she was feeling. It should have frightened her, the idea of riding off into the mountains with a stranger, but instead it felt right, like this was what she was supposed to do. Dawn came cold and gray, with frost on the wooden sidewalks and breath misting in the air. Delilah walked to the livery stable, her bags over her shoulder, and found Brennan already there, checking the cinch on a massive roan stallion that looked like it could run through a brick wall. A second horse, a sturdy sorrel mare, stood saddled and waiting. She is yours, Brennan said, nodding at the mare. Her name is Rosie. She has good mountain legs, and she will not spook easy. I am borrowing her from the stable owner. He owes me a favor. Delilah approached the mare, letting her smell her hand, then stroked her neck. She is beautiful, thank you. Can you really shoot? Brennan asked, watching her tie her bags onto the saddle. In answer, Delilah pulled out the Colt revolver she had tucked into her belt. My father taught me. I am not fancy, but I can hit what I aim at. Good enough. Brennan swung up onto his stallion with easy strength. We will ride north to Pocatello first. I have a contact there who saw Cord. After that, we follow the trail, wherever it leads. They rode out of Malad City as the sun broke over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The road north was well-traveled but empty at this early hour, and their horses settled into a steady pace that ate up the miles. Brennan rode slightly ahead, his eyes constantly scanning the landscape, and Delilah found herself studying him, trying to understand the man she had entrusted with her future. He moved like he was part of the horse, comfortable in a way that spoke of years in the saddle. His hands on the reins were broad and scarred, the hands of someone who had done hard physical work his whole life. When he turned to check on her, she saw the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the alertness of a predator. "How long have you been in the mountains?" she asked as they let the horses drink from a creek. "All my life. I was born in a cabin up in the Bitterroots. My father was a fur trapper, back when there was still money in furs. He taught me to track, to hunt, to survive. When he died, I stayed up there. It is where I belong." He looked at the peaks rising in the distance. "Most people are afraid of the mountains. They see danger and hardship. I see home. It must be lonely, sometimes, but it is honest. The mountain does lie to you. It does not pretend to be something it is not. If you are stupid or careless, it kills you. If you respect it, it gives you what you need." He glanced at her. "What about you? What was your life like before this?" Delilah thought about the ranch, about dawn chores and sunset rides to check the cattle, about the smell of her father's pipe tobacco and the sound of his laughter. "It was good. Hard work, but good. My father built that ranch from nothing. He came west after the war, bought land that nobody wanted, and made it into something real. He was a stubborn man, but fair. When my mother died, he raised me himself, taught me everything he knew. I thought I would live there my whole life, raise my own children there someday. You still might, if we get it back. Do you really think we can?" Bren was quiet for a moment, watering his horse, then looked at her directly. "I have tracked grizzly bears through snowstorms and followed mountain lions across Bear Rock. I once tracked a horse thief for 300 miles and brought him back to hang. Silas Cord is just a man, and men leave trails. We will find him." The certainty in his voice steadied something in Delilah's chest. She nodded, swinging back into the saddle. "Then let us not waste time." They reached Pocatello late in the afternoon. It was a rough railroad town, full of workers and drifters, with more saloons than churches and a general atmosphere of barely contained chaos. Brennan led them to a saloon called the Northern Star, tying the horses outside and telling Delilah to stay close. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of spilled whiskey. Men turned to stare at Delilah, and she felt their eyes like hands, assessing and invasive. But Brennan moved through the crowd with purpose, and something in his presence made men step aside. They found his contact at a back table, a grizzled man with one eye and a face like a dried apple. "Brennan," the man said, grinning to show broken teeth, "heard you were dead." "Not yet, Pike. I need information on Silas Cord." Pike's good eye flicked to Delilah, then back to Brennan. "He is trouble, that one. You sure you want to find him?" "Positive. You said you saw him 4 days ago." "That I did. He was here for 2 nights, staying at the hotel, spending money like he just robbed a bank. Had a fancy suit and a gold watch. He was heading east, said something about Denver, but I do not think that was true. Man like that, he lies just to stay in practice." "Which direction did he actually go?" Pike scratched his stubbled chin. "Word is he headed southeast, toward the Snake River. There is an old trading post there, Fort Hall Way. Fellow named Mackenzie runs it, does business with people who do not want to be found. If I was running from something, that is where I would go." Brennan pulled out a silver dollar and slid it across the table. "Appreciate it." "He is dangerous, Brennan. I have heard stories. He has killed men who got too close. Then I will have to get closer than that." Brennan stood, and Delilah followed him back out into the street. "Do you trust him?" she asked as they mounted up. "Pike? He is a liar and a cheat, but his information is usually good. If he says Cord went southeast, that is where we go." They rode out of Pocatello as the sun was setting, following a rough trail that paralleled the railroad tracks before veering off into wilder country. As darkness fell, Brennan found them a campsite in a grove of cottonwoods near a stream. He built a small fire while Delilah unsaddled the horses, working together in a comfortable silence that surprised her. It felt natural, like they had been doing this for years instead of hours. "You are good with the horses," Brennan observed as she brushed down the mare. "My father said that horses know when you are afraid or uncertain. They respond to confidence." She finished with the mare and moved to his stallion, who eyed her warily. "Even this one. Be careful. Goliath does not like most people." But Goliath stood still as Delilah approached, letting her brush his coat and check his hooves. Brennan watched with raised eyebrows. Well, I will be damned. Took me 2 weeks to get him to trust me. Maybe he knows I need him to be strong. We have a long way to go." She came back to the fire, accepting the coffee Brennan poured for her. It was strong and bitter, and she drank it gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. They ate hardtack and dried beef, not speaking much, listening to the night sounds of the wilderness around them. An owl called from the trees. Coyotes yipped in the distance. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks into the darkness. "Are you afraid?" Brennan asked eventually. Delilah considered the question. "I am angry. I am so angry that I can barely breathe sometimes. But afraid? No, not anymore. I have already lost everything. What else is there to be afraid of? Death. Maybe. But living the rest of my life knowing I did not fight back, that would be worse than dying." She looked at him across the fire, at his strong profile outlined in the flickering light. "What about you? Are you afraid?" "Always. Fear keeps you alive in the mountains. The trick is not letting it control you." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I have seen men freeze up when a grizzly charges, seen them panic and make stupid choices. Fear is information. You acknowledge it, and then you do what needs to be done anyway." "You are a wise man, Brennan Zeller." He laughed, a rough sound like rocks tumbling. "Not wise. Just old enough to have made most of the stupid mistakes already." "How old are you?" 29. "You?" 22. He nodded, as if this confirmed something. "You should get some sleep. We have a hard ride tomorrow, and it will only get harder from here." Delilah rolled herself in her blankets, using her saddle as a pillow, and watched the stars wheel overhead. She could hear Brennan moving around the camp, checking the horses, making sure everything was secure. It should have felt strange, sleeping in the wilderness with a man she barely knew, but instead it felt safer than she had felt in weeks. Brennan Zeller might be rough and dangerous, but she trusted him. She did not know why, but she did. She was almost asleep when she heard him settle down on the other side of the fire. "Delilah? Yes, we will get it back. Your inheritance, your home, everything. I promise you that. You should not make promises you cannot keep. I do not." She smiled in the darkness and let sleep take her. The next 3 days were a blur of hard riding and cold camps. They followed the Snake River southeast, asking questions at homesteads and trading posts, slowly piecing together Silas Cord's trail. He was staying ahead of them, but not by much. A storekeeper remembered selling him supplies 2 days before. A farmer had seen him cross his land at dawn. A half-breed trapper had shared a fire with him and reported that Cord was nervous, looking over his shoulder, asking questions about who might be following him. "He knows someone is after him," Brennan said as they made camp on the 4th night, "but he does not know it is us, not yet." They were high in the foothills now, with the mountains rising above them like a wall. The air was thin and cold, and Delilah could see snow on the peaks, brilliant white against the deep blue of the sky. The landscape was beautiful and harsh, and she understood why Brennan loved it. There was a purity here, a simplicity. Survive or die, truth or lies, no room for anything in between. "How much farther?" she asked, huddled close to the fire. "The trading post is half a day ahead. If Cord is there, we will have him by tomorrow night." Brennan studied her across the flames. "When we catch up to him, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Let me handle him. Stay back. Stay safe. I cannot focus on bringing him in if I am worried about you getting hurt." Delilah bristled. "I am not helpless. I can take care of myself." "I know you can. But Cord is a killer, and he will do anything to protect himself and his money. I have been in fights before. You have not. Just trust me on this." His voice softened. "Please." She wanted to argue, but there was something in his eyes, a concern that went beyond professional interest. It made her chest feel tight and warm. "All right, I will let you handle him. But I am staying close. I would expect nothing less." That night, lying in her bedroll, Delilah found herself thinking about Brennan in ways that had nothing to do with tracking thieves. She thought about the way his hands looked when he worked, competent and strong. She thought about his voice, the rough gentleness of it. She thought about how safe she felt when he was near, and how that safety felt different from anything she had known before, charged with something electric and undefined. She told herself it was just gratitude, just relief at having someone help her when she was desperate. But she knew it was more than that. She had been watching him, learning him, and what she saw drew her like metal to a lodestone. Brennan Zeller was a good man in a hard world, honest and capable and unexpectedly kind. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way that made her breath catch. It was too soon, she told herself. Too fast. They had known each other less than a week, but her heart did not seem to care about timing. It knew what it wanted, and it wanted him. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They broke camp quickly, eating a spare breakfast in the saddle, and rode hard for the trading post. It materialized out of the wilderness around midday, a rough collection of log buildings surrounded by a palisade of sharpened stakes. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and Delilah could see horses in the corral, including one fine black gelding that looked out of place among the rough work animals. "That is his horse," Brennan said quietly, pointing at the black. "He bought it in Salt Lake City 6 months ago. I have been tracking that horse as much as the man." They dismounted 100 yards from the post, tying the horses in a copse of aspen. Brennan checked his rifle, then his pistol, moving with the calm efficiency of a man preparing for battle. Delilah watched, her heart hammering in her chest, her own pistol suddenly heavy at her hip. "Remember what you promised," Brennan said. "Stay behind me." They approached the trading post cautiously. The gate was open, and they could hear voices inside, men laughing and arguing. Brennan moved through the gate like a shadow, and Delilah followed, her mouth dry, her hands shaking just slightly. The main building was a saloon and general store combined, dark and smoky and full of rough men. Brennan scanned the room, and Delilah saw his entire body tense. Silas Cord sat at a back table playing cards with 3 other men. He was younger than Delilah had expected, perhaps 30, with slicked back hair and a well-trimmed mustache. He wore an expensive suit, and a silk vest and a gold watch chain glittered at his waist. He looked like a successful businessman, not a thief and a murderer. But when he turned to sweep the room with his eyes, Delilah saw something cold and reptilian in his gaze, something that made her stomach turn. Brennan crossed the room in 4 long strides, moving so fast that Cord barely had time to register his presence before Brennan had his pistol out and pressed against Cord's temple. "Do not move," Brennan said quietly. "Do not even breathe hard." The room went silent. The other card players scrambled backward, hands raised. The bartender reached for something under the bar, but Brennan shook his head once, and the man froze. Cord's face had gone white, but his voice was steady. "I do not know what you think I have done, friend, but you have made a mistake. My name is Brennan Zeller. You stole a mining claim from a man named Robert Garrett. He was my friend. He killed himself because of what you did." Brennan's voice was cold as Winterstone. "You also stole a ranch and a silver claim from a woman named Delilah Grant. She is right behind me, and she wants her property back." Cord's eyes flicked to Delilah, and she saw recognition there, and calculation. "I do not know what you are talking about. I bought that property legally. I have the paperwork." "You forged the paperwork," Delilah said, surprised by how steady her own voice was. "My father could not have signed those documents. He was dying. I was with him every moment." "Then you are mistaken about the dates. People make mistakes when they are grieving." Brennan pressed the gun harder against Cord's skull. "Where is the money?" "What money?" "The $50,000 you got for selling the silver claim. The $10,000 for the cattle. The money you have been spending like water for the past month. Where is it?" Cord licked his lips. "You cannot prove anything. The law says that property is mine. I am not the law." Brennan pulled Cord to his feet, keeping the gun at his head. "I am something much worse. Now, we can do this easy, or we can do it hard. You are going to take us to where you are keeping the money, and you are going to sign papers giving everything back to Miss Grant. If you cooperate, I will turn you over to the territorial marshal, and you will get a trial. If you do not cooperate, I will shoot you and take the money anyway. Your choice." One of the other men at the table, a big fellow with a scar across his cheek, stood up slowly. "Cord pays us good money for protection. You might want to rethink this, friend." Brennan did not even look at him. "Sit down or die. Those are your options." The man measured Brennan with his eyes, taking in the size of him, the cold certainty in his voice, the way he held the gun like it was part of his hand. He sat down. "Smart," Brennan said. He shoved Cord toward the door. "Move." They went outside into the cold sunshine, Brennan keeping his gun on Cord, Delilah following with her own pistol drawn, her heart racing. The other men in the trading post did not follow. They walked to the corral, where Cord's black gelding stood among the other horses. "The money is in my saddlebags," Cord said, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "But you will never get away with this. I have friends, powerful friends. They will hunt you down." "Let them try." Brennan gestured with his gun. "Get the bags." Cord walked to his horse and pulled down 2 heavy leather saddlebags. He threw them on the ground at Brennan's feet, and when he straightened, his hand was moving toward a derringer in his vest. Delilah saw it happen in slow motion, Cord's hand flashing up, the tiny gun glinting in the sun. Brennan moving faster than she would have thought possible, his own gun swinging around. The crack of a shot, impossibly loud in the clear air. Cord screamed and dropped the derringer, clutching his hand where Brennan's bullet had shattered his finger. Blood streamed between his fingers and he fell to his knees, cursing. "I told you we could do this easy or hard," Brennan said. "You chose hard." He scooped up the saddlebags with one hand, keeping his gun trained on Cord with the other. "Delilah, check the bags." She holstered her own pistol and opened the saddlebags. Inside were stacks of bills, more money than she had ever seen at one time. She thumbed through them quickly, her hands shaking. "It is here. I think it is all here." "Good." Brennan backed toward their horses, dragging Cord with him. "Now we are going to ride to the nearest town with a marshal, and you are going to sign papers transferring the property back. If you are very lucky, you will live long enough to hang." They tied Cord's hands and threw him on his own horse, then mounted up and rode out of the trading post at a gallop. Behind them, Delilah could hear shouting, but no one followed. They rode hard for an hour, putting distance between themselves and anyone who might be thinking about coming after them, before Brennan finally slowed the pace. "That was too close," he said, glancing back at Cord, who sat slumped in his saddle, cradling his injured hand. "I should have searched him better." "You saved my life," Delilah said. "If he had shot you, he would have killed me next. Maybe. But I promised to keep you safe, and I almost failed." Brennan's jaw was tight with self-recrimination. "You did not fail. We have the money, and we have him. We won." She reached over and touched his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath his sleeve. "Thank you." He looked at her, and something passed between them, something that had been building since the moment they met. It was in his eyes, in the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. It was in the way her heart kicked when he was near, in the way she had come to trust him with everything she had. "We should keep moving," he said finally, his voice rough. "The nearest marshal is in Blackfoot, 2 days north. We can make it if we push hard." They rode through the afternoon and into the evening, stopping only to rest the horses and check on Cord, who had grown pale and silent, his injured hand wrapped in a strip of cloth. When they made camp that night, Brennan tied Cord to a tree well away from the fire, then came back to where Delilah was making coffee. "How are you?" he asked quietly. "I'm not sure. A week ago I had nothing. Now I have everything back, and I still feel like I am dreaming. It is real. We have him, and we have the money. When we get to Blackfoot, you can wire your bank, transfer the claim back, get your ranch returned to your name. It will take time, but it will happen." Delilah looked at the saddlebags sitting by the fire, stuffed with more money than her father had made in 20 years. "What about you? What do you get out of this?" Brennan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I get to know that Cord will not hurt anyone else. I get to know that Robert Garrett's death meant something, and I get to see you smile, which is worth more than any amount of money." The words hit Delilah like a physical thing, stealing her breath. She looked at him, at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to say, and felt something shift inside her, like a door opening onto a room full of light. "Brennan," she said softly, "why did you really help me? You could have gone after Cord yourself, turned him in, collected the reward. You did not need me along." He met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her shiver. "Because when I saw you standing there looking like your world had ended, I knew I could not walk away. Because you are brave and fierce and you deserve better than what Cord did to you. Because from the moment I met you, I could not stop thinking about you." Delilah's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I have been thinking about you too. I know it is too soon, I know we barely know each other, but I cannot help it. When I look at you, I feel like I am home. Brennan closed the distance between them in one smooth movement, his hands coming up to frame her face, and then he was kissing her. His lips were warm and firm, and he tasted like coffee and wood smoke and something indefinably him. Delilah melted into the kiss, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. Everything else fell away: the fire, the cold, the bound man by the tree, until there was only this, only them, only the feeling of rightness that flooded through her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Brennan rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the moment you agreed to come with me. I have been wanting you to." She smiled, feeling light and giddy, like she could float away. "I thought I was going crazy, too much, too fast. In the mountains, you learn to trust your instincts. Everything in me says you are right, that this is right. I do not need more time to know that." His hand slid down to her shoulders, holding her gently but firmly. "But I will give you all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. I do not need time. I know what I want." She kissed him again, softer this time, savoring it. "I want you, Brennan Zeller. I want this, whatever this is." They sat by the fire for a long time after that, talking in low voices, learning each other. Brennan told her about growing up in the mountains, about his father's death in an avalanche when Brennan was 16, about the years he had spent alone, tracking and hunting and surviving. Delilah told him about her mother's death, about the hard years that followed, about her father's dreams for the ranch and how they had become her dreams too. "What will you do now?" Brennan asked. "Go back to the ranch? Yes. It is my home. I will rebuild what Cord destroyed." She hesitated. "What about you? Will you go back to the mountains?" "That depends." "On what?" He looked at her steadily. "On whether you want me to stay. I meant what I said. I am not going anywhere you do not want me to be." Hope bloomed in Delilah's chest, warm and bright. "I want you to stay. I want you to help me rebuild. I want you to be there when I sign the papers, and when I walk back into my house, and every day after that, if you want that too. I want that more than I have ever wanted anything." He pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, feeling his warmth, his strength, his steady heartbeat against her cheek. They stayed like that until the fire burned down to embers, and then they settled into their bedrolls, close enough to touch. Delilah fell asleep listening to Brennan's breathing, feeling safer and more content than she had in months. The next 2 days passed in a blur. They rode hard, pushing the horses to their limits, anxious to reach Blackfoot and hand Cord over to the law. Cord himself grew increasingly desperate, alternating between trying to bargain with them and making threats about what his friends would do when they found out. Brennan ignored him completely, and Delilah learned to do the same. On the evening of the second day, they rode into Blackfoot just as the sun was setting. It was a small town, dusty and worn, but it had a jail and a marshal, and that was all they needed. They found the marshal's office easily enough, a squat building near the center of town. Marshal Tom Crawford was a lean man with gray hair and suspicious eyes. He listened to their story, examined the forged documents Delilah had brought, and looked at Cord's injured hand with a skeptical expression. "This is a serious accusation," he said finally. "I will need to wire the banks. Verify everything you are saying." "Verify all you want," Delilah said. "Everything I have told you is true. Silas Cord is a thief and a forger, and he needs to hang for what he has done." Crawford studied her, then nodded slowly. "All right, I will lock him up while I investigate. If what you say is true, he will stand trial." He looked at Brennan. "You planning on staying for that?" "Long as it takes." Brennan shifted his weight, his hand resting casually on his gun. "I want to make sure this is done right." "Fair enough." Crawford gestured for his deputy to take Cord to a cell. As the thief was led away, he turned back to look at Delilah, his eyes full of cold hatred. "You will regret this," he spat. "I promise you that." "The only thing I regret is not catching you sooner," Delilah replied evenly. When Cord was gone, Crawford offered them coffee and took detailed statements from both of them. He was thorough and professional, and by the time they left his office, Delilah felt confident that justice would be done. "What now?" she asked as they stood on the wooden sidewalk outside, watching the stars come out. "Now we wait. It will take a few days for the marshal to verify everything. In the meantime, we should get rooms at the hotel, clean up, rest. You have been sleeping on the ground for a week." They found rooms at the only hotel in town, side by side on the second floor. Delilah took the first real bath she had had since leaving Malad City, scrubbing away the trail dust and feeling human again. When she came down to the dining room for dinner, Brennan was waiting, and the sight of him nearly stopped her heart. He had cleaned up, too, shaving and washing his hair, though he still wore his buckskins and his bearskin coat. Without the trail dirt and the constant wariness, he looked younger, more approachable, though no less powerful. When he saw her, his face broke into a smile that transformed him, and Delilah felt her knees go weak. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself." They ate dinner together, talking and laughing, feeling the tension of the past week drain away. Around them, the dining room buzzed with conversation, but Delilah was only aware of Brennan, of the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, of the deep rumble of his laugh, of the way he listened to her like every word mattered. After dinner, they walked through the town, aimless and content. The night was cold but clear, and the stars overhead were brilliant. Brennan took her hand as they walked, and Delilah laced her fingers through his, marveling at how right it felt. "I have been thinking," Brennan said eventually, "about the ranch. You will need help running it, especially at first. Rebuilding takes work." "I know. I will have to hire hands, which will be expensive until the silver claim starts paying out again. Or you could take on a partner. Someone who knows hard work and is not afraid of it. Someone who would not need wages because he would have a share in the place." Brennan stopped walking and turned to face her. "Someone who loves you and wants to build a life with you." Delilah's breath caught. "Are you asking what I think you are asking? I am asking if you would let me stay, not just for a few weeks or months, but permanently. I am asking if you would let me be part of your life, part of your future." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite his strength. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a week. But I have never been more certain of anything. You are what I have been looking for without knowing I was looking. You are home." Tears stung Delilah's eyes, but they were happy tears. Tears of relief and joy and overwhelming emotion. "Yes," she whispered, "yes to all of it. I want you to stay. I want you to be my partner, in the ranch and in everything else. I love you, Brennan Zeller. I love you too, Delilah Grant, more than I knew I could love anyone." He kissed her then, right there on the street, and Delilah kissed him back with everything she had. Around them, people were probably staring, probably gossiping, but she did not care. All that mattered was this man, this moment, this feeling of absolute rightness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, Brennan took her hand and led her back to the hotel. At the door to her room, he kissed her again, soft and sweet. "Get some rest," he murmured. "Tomorrow we start building our future." "Our future," Delilah repeated, loving the sound of it. "I like that." She went to bed that night with her heart full, already dreaming of what came next. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Marshall Crawford's investigation confirmed everything Delilah and Brennan had claimed. The signatures on the forged documents did not match samples of her father's writing. Witnesses in Pocatello and Fort Hall testified that Cord had been spending money recklessly and bragging about his schemes. The bank in San Francisco, where Cord had wired the money from selling the silver claim, cooperated fully, providing records that showed the transactions. Cord tried to claim he had been duped, that someone else had forged the papers and framed him, but his story fell apart under questioning. When faced with the mountain of evidence, he finally confessed, hoping for leniency. He got none. The territorial judge sentenced him to 20 years in the federal prison at Deer Lodge, Montana, and Cord was transported there under heavy guard. With Cord convicted, the legal work began. Lawyers drew up papers transferring the ranch, the cattle, and the silver claim back to Delilah's name. The bank released the money Cord had stolen, every penny accounted for. It took 2 weeks, but by the end of it, Delilah legally owned everything her father had built, and Silas Cord was just a bad memory. "It is really over," she said to Brennan as they stood outside the lawyer's office, the deed to the ranch in her hands. "I have it all back. You do. And now we get to go home." Brennan took her hand, squeezing gently. "Ready?" "More than ready." They rode south toward Malad City in the early days of November. Snow was falling in the high mountains now, but the valleys were still clear, and the journey was easy compared to the desperate chase that had brought them together. They took their time, stopping to camp by streams and in sheltered meadows, enjoying each other's company without the pressure of pursuit. One night, camped under a sky full of stars, Brennan asked her to marry him properly, not just agreeing to be partners but committing to be husband and wife. He did not have a ring, but he offered her a carved wooden band he had made during their travel, smooth and warm from his hands. "It is not much," he said, looking almost shy, "but when we get to town I will get you a proper ring, gold or silver or whatever you want." "It is perfect," Delilah said, sliding the wooden band onto her finger. "And yes, I will marry you. I would marry you right now if we could find a preacher. We will find one in Malad City. I am not waiting any longer than I have to." They reached Malad City on a cold afternoon in mid-November. The town looked the same as when Delilah had left, but she felt entirely different. She was no longer the desperate, grieving woman who had lost everything. She was strong, capable, and in love, with her future stretching bright ahead of her. They went directly to the bank, where the manager nearly fell over himself, apologizing for not catching the forgery. Delilah accepted his apologies with grace and set about the business of reclaiming her accounts and establishing Brennan as a co-owner of the property. Then they went to the church where the preacher agreed to marry them the following Sunday. "I should buy a dress," Delilah said as they left the church. "Something nice. This is a special occasion. You could wear a flour sack and you would still be the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," Brennan said, making her blush. "But yes, buy a dress. Buy whatever makes you happy." The days before the wedding passed quickly. Delilah spent them settling affairs, hiring back the ranch hands who had been let go when Cord took over, and ordering supplies for the winter. Brennan spent them getting to know the ranch, learning the land and the rhythms of the work, proving to the hired men that he was more than capable of carrying his weight. On Sunday morning, Delilah put on a dress of pale blue silk, the finest thing she had ever owned, and walked to the church on Brennan's arm. There were not many guests, a few townsfolk who had known her father, the ranch hands, the preacher's wife, but it was enough. When Brennan took her hand and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his life, his voice was steady and sure, and Delilah felt her heart swell with so much happiness she thought it might burst. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said, smiling. "You may kiss your bride." Brennan cupped Delilah's face and kissed her softly, and the small congregation applauded. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, and Delilah knew that her father would have been proud. They moved into the ranch house that afternoon. It felt strange at first, walking through rooms that Cord had occupied, but Brennan helped her scrub and clean until the house felt like hers again. They worked side by side, unpacking her belongings, arranging furniture, making the place a home. That night, they sat by the fire in the parlor, Delilah curled against Brennan's side, and talked about the future. "I want to expand the herd," she said, "and maybe build a new barn. The old one is falling apart. We can do that. The silver claim will give us the money we need, and I can handle the heavy work." Brennan stroked her hair absently. "What about children? Do you want a family?" "Someday, not right away, but yes, I want children. Do you? I want to see you hold our baby. I want to teach our sons and daughters to ride and track and survive. I want to build something that lasts." He kissed the top of her head. "I want everything with you, Delilah." "You have me," she whispered. "You have all of me for the rest of our lives." The winter was hard, as winters in Idaho always were. Snow piled high around the ranch house, and the temperatures dropped until the air itself felt brittle. But inside, Delilah and Brennan were warm, working together to keep the ranch running, taking care of the cattle and horses, planning for the spring. Brennan proved to be everything Delilah had hoped and more. He worked harder than any man she had ever known, up before dawn to break ice on the water troughs, out in the worst weather to check on the animals. The ranch hands respected him quickly, recognizing a man who knew what he was doing and was not afraid of hard work. But it was the quiet moments Delilah treasured most. The evenings by the fire, reading or talking, or simply sitting together, the mornings waking up in his arms, feeling safe and loved, the way he looked at her like she was a miracle he could not quite believe in, the way he made her laugh, even on the hardest days. In late January, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told Brennan on a snowy evening as they sat by the fire, and he looked at her with such joy and wonder that she started crying. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "I am sure we are going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you for this, for everything I love so much. I love you too." The pregnancy was easy, and Delilah continued working on the ranch well into the summer, only slowing down when Brennan started worrying about her overdoing it. Their son was born in early September, a healthy boy with a powerful set of lungs and his father's blue eyes. They named him James. After Delilah's father, Brennan cried when he held his son for the first time, big tears rolling down his weathered cheeks. "He is perfect," Brennan said, his voice choked with emotion. "You are perfect. I do not know what I did to deserve this, but I will spend the rest of my life being grateful." "You saved me," Delilah said softly, watching her husband cradle their child with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "You gave me back my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. The ranch prospered, the silver claim paying out steadily, allowing them to expand and improve. They hired more hands, built the new barn Delilah had wanted, and bought more land to the north. Brennan became known throughout the territory as a fair boss and a skilled tracker, and people came to him when they needed help finding lost animals or people. 2 years after James was born, Delilah had a daughter they named Sarah, after Brennan's mother. She was a wild child from the start, fearless and curious, climbing everything she could reach. 3 years later came another son, Michael, who was quieter and thoughtful, always watching and learning. The ranch became a place of laughter and life, full of children and animals, and the constant activity of a working homestead. Delilah and Brennan worked side by side through all of it, partners in every sense of the word, raising their family and building something that would last for generations. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they rode up into the mountains together, leaving the children with trusted hands for a few days. It was autumn again, the aspens turning gold, the air crisp and clean. They made camp by a high mountain lake, the same kind of wild country where Brennan had grown up. "Do you ever miss it?" Delilah asked as they sat by the fire, watching the stars come out. "The solitary life, the freedom?" Brennan pulled her close, wrapping his bearskin coat around both of them. "Not for a second. Everything I need is down in that valley. You are children, the life we built together. The mountains will always be here when I need them, but home is with you. I am glad you came into my life when you did. I do not know what would have happened if you had not been in that street the day I lost everything. I do. You would have fought back anyway, because that is who you are. You would have tracked Cord yourself and gotten your inheritance back. You are the strongest person I know, Delilah. You did not need me to save you. You needed a partner, and that is what I have tried to be. You have been everything," she said, turning to kiss him. "Everything I needed and everything I wanted. I love you, Brennan Zeller. I love you too, always will." They stayed in the mountains for 3 days, reveling in the solitude and each other's company. But when they rode back down to the ranch, both were eager to see their children, to get back to the busy, chaotic, wonderful life they had built. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their family. James grew tall and strong like his father, learning to track and hunt and work the land. Sarah became an accomplished rider, fearless and independent with her mother's determination. Michael developed a head for numbers and business, taking over the management of the ranch's finances as he got older. When Delilah turned 40, she and Brennan took stock of what they had built. The ranch now covered 5,000 acres, with 300 head of cattle and a remuda of quality horses. The silver claim, carefully managed, had made them wealthy by any standard. Their children were grown and starting families of their own. James marrying a rancher's daughter from the next valley over, Sarah courting a young lawyer from Pocatello, Michael heading east to study business. "We did well," Brennan said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. He was 50 now, his hair graying at the temples, his face lined from years in the weather, but still strong and vital. "We did better than well. We built something real, something that will last." Delilah leaned against him, content. "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one." Every choice I made led me to you, and I would not change any of it." He took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the gold wedding band that had long since replaced the carved wooden ring, though she still kept that first ring in a box by her bedside. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Delilah. Then, now, always." "You saved me," she said, not for the first time. "That day in Malad City, when I had nothing and nowhere to go, you saved me." "No," Brennan said firmly. "We saved each other. You gave me a reason to come down from the mountains, a reason to be part of the world. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. We saved each other." Delilah smiled because he was right. What had started as a desperate hunt for a thief had become the greatest love story she could have imagined. Silas Cord had tried to destroy her life, and instead, he had led her straight to the man she was meant to be with. As the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars appeared, Delilah sent up a silent prayer of thanks. Thanks for her father, who had built the foundation she stood on. Thanks for Brennan, who had helped her defend it and had become her partner in every way that mattered. Thanks for their children and the life they had created together. But most of all, thanks for that cold October day when a mountain man had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer and had promised to help her get back what was stolen. He had kept that promise and so many others, and in doing so, had given her everything she had ever wanted. Years later, when Delilah was old and gray, sitting on that same porch with Brennan beside her, she would still remember that day with perfect clarity. The telegram that had destroyed her life. The bank manager's sweating palms. The moment Brennan Zeller had spoken to her in his rough, gentle voice and offered to help. It had been the worst day of her life and the best day of her life all at once. The day she lost everything and the day she found the only thing that truly mattered. Their grandchildren would play in the yard, running and shouting, and Brennan would squeeze her hand and smile, and Delilah would know with absolute certainty that they had done something remarkable. They had taken theft and grief and turned it into love and legacy. They had built a life that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they found each other and refused to let go. The ranch would pass to James and his children, then to their children, carrying the Grant name into the future. The story of how Brennan tracked down Silas Cord and recovered Delilah's inheritance would become family legend, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was simpler and more profound. It was a story about two people who met when they both needed saving, who chose each other and fought for that choice, who built something beautiful out of determination and love. It was a story about partnership and trust, about finding home in another person, about creating a legacy that would outlast any amount of money or land. It was in the end a love story, the kind that started fast and burned bright and never dimmed, not through all the years and challenges and changes that life brought, the kind that proved that sometimes, when everything falls apart, it is only clearing the way for something better. And when Delilah drew her last breath many years later, with Brennan's hand in hers and their family gathered around, her final thought was one of gratitude. Gratitude for the thief who had inadvertently led her to the love of her life. Gratitude for the mountain man who had promised to get back every penny and had given her so much more. Gratitude for a life well lived, full of love and purpose and joy. Brennan followed her 6 months later, his body finally giving out after 8 decades of hard living. They buried him next to Delilah on a hill overlooking the ranch under the wide Idaho sky, with the mountains rising in the distance like eternal guardians. On their shared headstone, their children had carved a simple inscription. Together they built a legacy. Together they rest. But those who knew them, who had seen the way they looked at each other, even after 50 years of marriage, knew the real story. They had not just built a legacy. They had lived one, and their love, born in desperate circumstances and forged through shared trials, had proven stronger than any challenge the world could throw at them. The ranch prospered for generations after them, a living monument to what they had created. But the true monument was not the land, or the buildings, or even the family that bore their name. It was the story itself, the tale of how a woman swindled out of her inheritance, and a mountain man seeking justice had found each other and built a life that mattered. In the end, Silas Cord's theft had been the best thing that ever happened to Delilah Grant. Not because she got her inheritance back, though she did. Not because justice was served, though it was. But because it brought her Brennan Zeller, and with him, everything she had ever truly needed. Their love story became legend in the territory, told in saloons and parlors, around campfires and kitchen tables. People spoke of the mountain man who tracked a thief across hundreds of miles and recovered every stolen penny. They spoke of the woman who rode with him, brave and determined, refusing to give up. But those who really knew them understood that the tracking and the recovering were just the beginning. The real story was what came after. The ranch they built together, the children they raised, the 50 years of partnership and love that proved that sometimes the worst thing that can happen is the doorway to the best. And so the story ended where all good stories should end, with love triumphant, justice served, and a family legacy that would endure for generations. Delilah Grant and Brennan Zeller had started as strangers brought together by crime and necessity. They ended as soulmates who had built a life that would be remembered and celebrated long after they were gone. It was a happy ending, hard-won and well-deserved, and in the Wild West of the 1870s and beyond, where life was harsh and uncertain and often brutally short, a happy ending was the greatest gift anyone could hope for. They had found theirs together, and that made all the difference.